DeSanto Propane is 4 generations strong as a trustworthy, family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574 today. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Against the Boards. Chamberlain Bauder here with you for another week as we talk about the Rochester Americans and Knighthawks on the ice and on the turf at Blue Cross Arena. We're going to start out with the Rochester Americans here today, who since last episode have not been doing too hot. I think we might have to take a note from our superstitions about the Knighthawks and start using them on the Amerks as we keep going here. But since our last episode, this team has lost their last 3 games, making it 5 in a row now that they've fallen, all of them by only 1 goal. 2 of those, of course, being shootout losses. And then against Laval over last weekend, it was 2 comeback wins for the Rocket, scoring multiple goals in the third period to take the lead and then eventually take the win. And yesterday, of course, the Rochester Americans were at home taking on the Charlotte Checkers, and they fell there 3-4. This weekend, a home game against the Bruins will be coming up, and interestingly enough, only played the Providence Bruins one other time this season. It was on the road, and it was a 3-0 loss earlier in the year in, I believe, December, as I'm scrolling back to it. It was in November, actually, so it's been quite a while since a matchup with the Bruins. It's one of those teams not being in the North that you only play at home and away in the regular season. So they'll be hoping for a different outcome. Obviously, a fight to snap against that 5-game losing streak that they're on right now. Last win was against the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. But of course, still near the top of the AHL right now with 1 game played more than Hershey and Laval. They currently sit 3 points away from Laval and 2 points away from Hershey. They're in third place now in the AHL. Hershey with 76 points, the Amerks with 74, and Laval with 77, thanks to those 2 big-time wins over the Amerks over the weekend. Now, we won't dwell on the sadness of this last week for the Amerks too much right now. On Tuesday, I had the opportunity to sit down with the netminder for the Rochester Americans, Devon Levi, of course, a prospect that just about everyone in Buffalo knows. And if you don't, just remember Sam Reinhart a little bit. He's what the Sabres got in that trade along with a first-round pick. When he came over, he was already a 1-time Richter Award winner, then won another one at Northeastern. He's the only goalkeeper ever to win 2 Richter Awards, giving now 3 to the College of Northeastern. Of course, right before him, it was Caden Primo who played there, which, ironically enough, Laval's starting goalie this season has been Caden Primo. So always interesting to see that on the other end of the ice. But without further ado, we'll send it to that interview with Amerks and Sabres goalie Devon Levi. All right, we're here with Buffalo Sabres and Rochester Americans goalie Devon Levi. Midweek practice right now, so actually we're going to kind of take it back a little bit. Give fans an idea a little bit more of who you are as a person aside from the hockey player. So my first question for you is just kind of why hockey and what, as in your childhood, led you to kind of take on this path of then becoming a goalie too?
Yeah, I grew up in Montreal, so the hockey culture there is obviously pretty prominent. My dad put me in skates, I think, when I was like 3 or 4 years old. Didn't like it at first, but grew to love skating and love the game once I was able to stand on the ice. So it's that's kind of how I started out. I became a goalie when I was like 9 or 10, maybe. A little bit later, started off as a player. Loved playing, loved skating. It was good for me to learn how to skate, but I always felt like I had a passion for stopping pucks when we play street hockey and play some ball in the basement. And I'd always want to strap the pads on.
Yeah, interesting. You just didn't like moving that much, or was it maybe one of those mental things of I think I can stop you, so you had the other way to kind of show off.
Yeah, you know, I don't think I was thinking like that when I was 10 years old. It kind of developed into that, but I just, you know, thought it was cool, like defend the cage, keep the puck out, you know, stuff just like hand-eye, and it was I just loved it. Like it was always fun.
Were you a multi-sport athlete when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, not competitively, but played tennis a lot with my family. Did a few tennis camps. Probably helped me with goaltending.
I was going to say the lateral movement there, right?
Yeah. I always played like sports in high school, like football, basketball with my friends. Other than that, like nothing too crazy. I always loved other sports. Like playing sports every day at school with my brother when I get home from school. So you know, we were always pretty active.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it also makes sense that hockey was still the clear number one sport when you've literally never had a season in your life with under a 90% save percentage. I had to calculate this year's numbers to make sure that was the case. But yeah, I mean, from AAA midget, like everything that's been calculated for you, you've never played a season with less than a 90% save percentage. Did it come naturally, do you think, the goaltending when you got into midgets? Did it just feel like this is the position I'm supposed to play in hockey?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I knew that was the position I was supposed to play right when I became a goalie. Like, I just loved it. You know, regardless of what the stats or the outcomes were, I just felt like at place with myself, and I just loved what I was doing. You know, I feel like a lot of the stats and the outcomes, they're cool. It's cool to hear that, but you know, I've been playing with amazing players and great teams. I had the pleasure to, you know, be in some amazing locker rooms, and it's really those memories that, you know, the memories of being with the guys, but also, you know, being their goalie, which is, you know, what gives me pleasure, what makes me happy. And yeah, just like hearing you talk about midget and you know, the other years that I've played, just bring up good memories.
Yeah, I mean, the game of being a goalie in really any sport is have guys give you the shots that you want. Obviously, it's that team dynamic. It's not just on you to make the stops from wherever. It's on your defense to give you the shots that you want. Just, I mean, as you know, I look at the way that hockey is, and for you as a goalie, and you come into this position, and you always want to make sure that it's about the team more, and that's just the hockey kind of mindset, right? It's very team-centric. We do this collectively, or we don't do it at all kind of a mindset. Just for you, I mean, I've heard from you, I feel like plenty of times talk about the stats are, yeah, okay, cool, that happened. Like, yeah, I'm the only goalie to ever win back-to-back Richter Awards, but I mean, that wasn't just you doing it, is what you would claim in most situations. How do you just keep that goalie mindset of this is 60 minutes at a time, every single time, every week, it's this week, every day, it's this day, this practice, this game, whatever it is. Just was it hardwired into you when you were a kid, or is it?
Yeah, I think, you know, just my dad had a big part of that, my character, and, you know, making me, you know, the way I think, the way I am today. And yeah, I mean, as a goalie, the best part of it is that, like, you're the last line of defense, you know, like things will break down, and then you're kind of the guy that has to hopefully provide the solution. And, you know, I like taking that responsibility. Like, I don't expect my teammates to show me the shots that I want per se. It's more like, if there's a breakdown, I'm here for you. And just like if I'm out of position, they're here for me too. You know, blocking shots and, you know, picking up sticks, boxing out guys. So it's more of like we're there helping each other. It's not going to be perfect, but we find a way together. And just the beauty of the nature of the position, just being heavily relied on, and also relying on my teammates. You know, that relationship carries off the ice too, just into the locker room, everyday life. Even like at the dinner table with some of my teammates, just always looking out for each other.
Yeah. You give me the vibe that you're just a fan of the process. Would you agree with that? I mean, maybe in the terms of, you know, a week or a game's getting ready for a game, but also in the terms of, I look at the way the NHL goalies, you know, come up and the way it's a long road to actually fully get into the NHL. You don't see a lot of guys at your age that are able to break through. Just Would you agree that you're kind of just a fan of the process and you know it takes time to get to those places?
Yeah, I mean, the best part is the journey. You know, the destination's only so long. So if you're not having fun on the journey, you're not going to appreciate the destination. So it's probably the most important thing as a goalie, just because it does take so long. And if you're just upset that every day you're not where you want to be, or you're not getting what you want, you're not getting the right outcomes, then you can drive yourself crazy, because goaltending is such a mental roller coaster. And so it's important to be able to step off the roller coaster and just enjoy the view once in a while. So just being able to like understand that, you know, the process and loving it is what makes you great. That's what gets you the outcomes, rather than just focusing on the outcomes. First of all, it gives you a lot of mental peace. Also makes the journey a hell of a lot more fun.
Yeah, definitely. Your journey I don't even want to actually start with NHL. I want to go back to your college a little bit, but it's just so interesting to see the way that, I don't know obviously how your mindset was, but from looking at it, you know, you get to go straight into the NHL out of college, and you have the games that you do that stack up there that show, I mean, maybe I can just come straight into the NHL. Maybe that is the way that I find my game. And last year, you're kind of 50-50, it almost feels like, back and forth. And now this year, you just have stability, really, is what it feels like. And would you agree that that's kind of just how that went? Or how did you engage the NHL roller coaster as you came out of college?
Yeah, you know, I don't think anyone expected, including myself, just for me to play in the NHL and be the best goalie in the NHL for the rest of my career. Like it's not always, you know, an upward trajectory to success. There are ups and downs, and you know that going in. There's gonna be great moments. There's gonna be moments that are hard, but they're all put in place for you to be able to become who you're supposed to be down the line. So, you know, whether I'm playing in the NHL, the AHL right now, it's, you know, regardless, it's as long as I'm being the best version of myself I could be every day, I know that I'm going to be where I need to be at the end of the day. So just focusing on my process, loving it. Like, I'm in the American League right now. This is where I want to be. I love it here. I love my teammates. I want to win. Yeah. Regardless of where I am, you know, I want to win every day. I want to win the day with my teammates. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. Back to college, just quick. Well, we won't stay on it for too long. So what kind of led you to that decision of Northeastern? And when you look at Boston and the New England area, did it just kind of give you enough similarity to where you were in Montreal that you liked that area, or was it just the program itself and the recruitment?
Yeah, you know, I only fell in love with Boston once I was at school. I visited once, but it was after I committed. I committed before visiting. It was just such an amazing school, great program, and like educationally, but also obviously on the ice, the hockey program was, you know, second to none. They recruited me, and you know, they kind of threw the book at me. They wanted me to be their starter, and it was a pretty big honor. There's been a lot of great goalies there, so it was kind of no brainer for me. This was for sure the best opportunity that I was given, and you know, I felt wanted. I felt like I had the coach's support. You know, Jim Madigan was the head coach at the time, and you know, I talked to him so many times before coming in, and he really believed in me, even though I was playing in the CCHL, which, you know, wasn't the best junior league. And he was able to kind of see me for who I am. I'm super grateful for him. He's a big part of why I'm here today. Same thing with Jerry Keefe, our other coach here, in Northeastern, who ended up becoming head coach when Jim Madigan became the athletic director. And you know, everyone at Northeastern, all my teammates, you know, took me in so nicely, and I just felt like I was at home there right away. And then Boston eventually became like a second home to me too. Just being out with the guys, you know, being in school, walking around campus, going to see other campuses. It was like a super, super cool feel. Like it's like all of downtown Boston was basically like a giant college campus.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
Six, right? There's like 6 or 7.
Yeah, they're all like right there.
Yeah,
you got Fenway Park right there too. We went to a bunch of games there, and you know, going to the Garden also, playing in the Garden. It's just an unbelievable city.
Yeah. Is it interesting for you, like specifically this year, that the battle for the North is like you can look down the ice and it's Caden Primo at the other end? And you're like, all right, let's represent, I guess.
Yeah, it's cool. He's a great guy. He obviously had an amazing career at Northeastern, and I remember going into school, I was telling myself, I want to have a career like that guy. Like he he was the man here, and I want to be able to do what he did. So yeah, he's a great goalie.
Yeah. Now, obviously, AHL this season. One of the things that I can't get over from just your last 2 years is the similarities to Ryan Miller, whether that just be in the career trajectory type of things, but also in, I think, a lot of Buffalo fans' hopes for what, you can be as a player. Obviously, you don't want to compare, but then you get places putting out the stat sheets where it's like you guys had the same exact goals against average at one point this season, like the same number of saves even at one point. You were like 2 away from him in shutouts at that point in the season. When you get compared to a goalie like that, how do you take it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an honor. He's such an amazing goalie and person. I had the pleasure of meeting him, having some conversations with him. Very smart, intellectual guy. Just based off one conversation with him, I could tell why he was so successful in the NHL. He's a special goalie. I grew up watching him, aspired to be like him. So, these comparisons are pretty cool. Obviously, it's pretty early. Like, it's just numbers, too. There's a lot more that goes into being a goalie than your save percentage. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And, when you're being compared to someone like that, it definitely feels good.
Yeah. How is it for you? What is the key, like, when it comes to balancing? Obviously, you have this humble mindset. We're a team. I'm never doing anything by myself. But then you get these kinds of accolades, and you're obviously, you're hardwired right your way. But just how do you balance that ego, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's not the reason why you do what you do. I mean, you're allowed to feel good and, be proud of yourself. But, understanding like why you play the game and not forgetting, not losing focus or not losing sight of what put you here, why you're here, what got you started. That love for actually stopping pucks and not for the outcome and the praise that you get for stopping pucks. Being able to stay grounded and really just what's your why? Who are you playing for? Why are you playing? Doing it for your teammates, your family, for the love of the game. Just because hockey's such a great sport. I think back to when I was a little kid, at the ODR with my parents, playing street hockey, with my friends, and all those competitive moments in my life are the most memorable and the most fun I've had, just competing. So being able to do that with the best players in the world is why I do what I do, and it's a thrill, it's a feeling that it's hard to replicate outside of the hockey arena.
Yeah, definitely. 2 more questions for you. I mean, you look at the goalie position in probably every sport as arguably the most superstitious athlete that you can find on the field. Obviously, you have a couple of your little superstitions, I guess is the way to put it, whether it's traditions, going in onto the side and meditating during the cleaning of the ice. Just, do you have a favorite or weirdest superstition of yours? It's something that you maybe have to do every game to be Devon in goal?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm overly superstitious. I feel like I'm more there's more of a method to the madness of what I do. I try to do things with a purpose, and if putting on my left pad instead of my right pad first isn't the type of guy that I am. It's more like I do my meditation on the ice to clear my mind and to make sure that just check in with my body, make sure my head's in good space, make sure my body's in good space. Just skating in the corner is something that just get away from the net for a second, just mentally snap out of it and just take a second to check in and then hop back in the net and just clean slate. So I wouldn't say it's superstition. I'd say it's more of a routine, a mental routine. Just what kind of gets my mind back into the play and clicks to get the page turned over. So it's more like that kind of stuff that I do. When I tap the glass 3 times, on that third tap, it just kind of, I've done it so many times now where that third tap is just kind of whatever I was thinking kind of disappears, and on my way back to the net, all I'm thinking about is the next play. So, yeah.
Awesome. That's basically exactly what I was kind of wondering, because with that routine, and goalies become such a habit of routine, right? What else are you going to do? You get stuck in a little blue square and you're told to stay here and do the job kind of a thing. Last question for you. You talked about it in the press conference a couple weeks ago about how having the target on your back allows for you guys to be playing that playoff type atmosphere every single time you come out of the floor. Just for me, with our podcast, as we've been talking, one of the things that was interesting for me is this coaching switch happens this year. It felt like in years past, the Amerks are always fighting to march, so that it's the march to the playoffs, right? And you're playing that playoff hockey to get there. And now it's kind of that opposite end of it. Everyone else is trying to play their playoff hockey against you as you're going down this stretch. Just, I guess, what is it like being on the top right now and having the target on your back?
Yeah, I mean, being on the top, all that being on the top means is that there's somebody else that's chasing you from behind, trying to be on top. You know, there's no place of comfort. Like, if you're the one that's being chased or if you're the one chasing, like, you can never take your foot off the gas. It's always like time to go, time to go to war. You know, you know that we have teams coming into our building wanting to take our spot, and you know the question is, are we going to let them do that? And then regardless if we were in another position, it's like we got a team that's in our spot. Are we going to let them stay there? So it's kind of like it's the same mentality. It's just regardless of who you're playing, just go and like be the best that you can be and try to win the game. Obviously, I don't think that we're comfortable being in first place or second place now. But there's always that hunger. You want to win every game. You want to be at the top of the division by the end of the year. And even at that, like, that's not enough. You want to be the last team playing hockey in June. So, you know, I don't think that we've ever been comfortable being in first place. I think that there's always more. There's always more. Like, you're not satisfied until you win. And I think that, you know, we have that mentality. We want to win. We want to go to the end. We're not really too preoccupied with standings and, you know, where we're at. It's more important that we're playing our best hockey night in and night out so that we know that when we get to playoffs, we know we have that ability.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thanks,
yeah.
Devon.
Thanks, man.
And there was Devon Levi, goalkeeper for the Rochester Americans right now. Of course, a prospect of the Buffalo Sabres. He was drafted in the 7th round by the Florida Panthers and traded in the big Sam Reinhart trade along with a first-round pick to the Buffalo Sabres. And now, ideally, in Sabres fans' minds, the next Ryan Miller. We can only hope that that would be the product that can come out because, as you heard us talking about right there, you can compare all that you want, but ultimately every player is different and every player is going to carve their own path to the NHL. And I have to say, I think that Devon Levi has definitely found his way into cutting that niche for himself, I guess is the way that I would put it. Last week, an interesting situation for the Amerks with Isak Rosén getting called up, of course, missing a couple games after that with the Amerks after that Wilkes-Barre game, gets called up to the Buffalo Sabres for a short week. He got sent back yesterday, but sent up just before him was alternate captain Josh Dunn. Now, Dunn is a little bit more of an interesting one. Dunn also got sent back to the Amerks yesterday. So now both are back in the lineup, which means we'll see some changes to that line. Of course, going through those losses without one of your starting centers and your leading scorer is definitely going to change the dynamic of your team. But ultimately, there's a bit more of a conversation with Josh Dunn getting pulled up that I kind of want to have. We'll keep it short and sweet, but it revolves around number 81 for the Rochester Americans, and that is, of course, Brett Murray. Big Murr is someone that his size you think should speak for itself. Yesterday against the Checkers, getting into a little scrap there for his team, and it's just interesting to me because you see Murray do these at different times. I really only think this was maybe his third, or you can count on one hand in the last 3 years how many times Brett Murray has dropped the gloves and thrown his body weight around as an enforcer. Now, given his body size also allows him to block pucks on the defensive end and tip passes in front of the net on the offensive end, score those gritty goals. But when you're the size of Brett Murray and you're in the AHL, your job when you come up to the NHL is to hit people and be a fourth line chaos creator. That is your job. That's why he is a Sabre, technically. if Josh Dunn is getting called up to play the job of the fourth line chaos creating player, then what place does Brett Murray have on this team? I don't know if any. So if he's content to be an AHL player for his entire career, then he's got it going and he's right where he wants to be on a successful team in the AHL. If he has NHL aspirations, though, which obviously every prospect you'd think does have those aspirations, he needs to figure out what his NHL game is. And it should probably be intertwined with his size as a main factor for it. So ultimately, I think Brett Murray becomes one of those players where, as years go on for the Amerks and for the Sabres, if they're going to keep calling other people up that they just signed this year that were undrafted players that are not even prospects in their organization, if they're going to call them up over a Brett Murray, how long will Brett Murray be under contract with this organization? I honestly don't know. It's something to think about as we get to the end of the season and look at, free agency and turnover and different things like that. Could he be the next Brandon Biro? I honestly think yes. I do think that, obviously not at all a player comp, but in what they provided to Rochester versus what they provide to Buffalo and how worthwhile that is to have on the roster, I just don't know where his value is going to stick out as time goes on. Even a guy like Tyson Kozak getting called up before Brett Murray is something that's just kind of an interesting thing to note. So we'll keep an eye on that as things go on. One of the stars of this show, since we started it, really not awkwardly, but just unintentionally, I guess, was, of course, Nicholas Aube-Kubel. Aube-Kubel gets sent down from the Buffalo Sabres after signing in a free agency over the offseason and immediately enjoyed the winning nature of the Rochester Americans when he was playing in that game last week against Wilkes-Barre. Even came away with a goal in that one, scored one of the 5 Amerks goals in their last win that they've had, but he gets traded on the deadline for a new defender for the Rochester Americans, and that defender being Erik Brannstrom. And I didn't think that the Amerks were going to replace firepower with firepower when they traded away a forward for a defenseman in the way that they did, and it really felt like one of those, isn't Aube-Kubel helping the Amerks right now, and you're looking at trading him for someone that's still going to be on the Amerks? So, what's the hope there? Well, the hope, I guess, was that Erik Brannstrom would come in and do what he did yesterday, which is score the first 2 goals of the game for the Rochester Americans. He's in the middle there. You can't see number 28 very well out of the group, but getting hugs from his new teammates there, as for the first time since 2018, when he made his AHL debut, only the second time now ever that he's scored 2 goals in an AHL game. But as we said there, ultimately losing to the Charlotte Checkers yesterday, 4-3. But good to see that the new signing can add some firepower to the squad and get pucks to the back of the net. And of course, that game yesterday without the team's leading scorer and without Josh Dunn out there as well. So realistically for the Amerks, how things shake out, I mean, you get reinforcements back in both Dunn and Rosie coming up for this Friday. You're going to still be at home over the weekend or just this Friday, and then you have a week off of the season. So big game against Providence this Friday. Now, like we said before we started the episode today, if you know where my superstitions lie as things go with the Knighthawks, you know that things have kind of been working out with betting against them on the show. And unfortunately, last week I was uber confident in the Amerks, and then they went and lost 3 in a row. So, with that said, I am not picking the Amerks for this Friday game. Now, given what I will say before I pick is they need to win this game. If you go into a week off on a 6-game losing streak, one, Coach Leo's going to give you a rough week. It will not be any sort of a break. You'll probably be working harder than if you had a 3-5 that week. And second, That's just not the taste that you as an Amerk want in your mouth going into this, defending the end of the season and keeping a good playoff spot for your team. Not a way to go, being down 6 games in a row before you get a week where everyone else gets to catch up to you. So with that said, it is definitely a must-win scenario for the Rochester Americans on this Friday in my mind. Now, with that being said, they got beat 3-0 the last time they took on this Providence team. I don't think there's really a scenario where the Amerks go into a game at this point in the year with their offense cooking the way it is and don't score. But I could very well see this Bruins team being someone that takes the Amerks right out of their game. And by their game, I mean a game where neither team really exceeds 4 goals, given that's not what we've seen a lot out of the Amerks over the last 3 years, but that is the ideal game of Coach Leone for the new Amerks this season. Is if you don't allow more than 3 goals, you can win the game. I don't think this will be a game that will be decided by having one team with less than 3 goals. I think we're looking at a 5-4, a 6-4 type game with a possible empty netter at the end. Maybe a 5-4 or a 4-3, but I think it's going to be higher, on the higher end. Isak Rosen comes back into the lineup, of course, an immediate spark plug. You can likely see 2 points from him alone. There's 2 goal contributions for the Amerks. Dunn coming back from the NHL. Will the game be a little bit slower now on the AHL ice in Rochester? We'll have to just wait and see on that one. But all in all, we'll go with 6-4 Bruins as my pick for this game. I don't think that the Amerks will be able to get into that settled down defensive effort that they want to be able to play in this game. Their next game after that will be at home a week following on Friday against the Charlotte Checkers. But now with everything Amerks summed up, let's head over to the Rochester Knighthawks, who, by the way, just scored a franchise record in goals in a single game. I am so glad that I realized I need to start predicting these games wrong for the Knighthawks. Oh my goodness. I said this was going to be an 11-9 win for the Desert Dogs. I said both of these young goalies are playing really well at this point in the season, both coming off of 2 great weeks. Both of them got pulled in the first half. And then both of them got put back in the fourth quarter and then pulled again later on in the game. It was a roller coaster in the crease for both teams. There's really no doubt about it. Obviously, Knighthawks go down by 4 to open the game in the first 5 minutes, and immediately Hazen knows what he has to do, has to pull out Hartley in that situation. And thankfully, Riley Hutchcraft really is a starting goalie in the NLL. I don't think that anything else has been proven by this team throughout this season. Comes in, only allows, really nothing through that second quarter and into the third. They completely started to shut down the Desert Dogs, and their offense just never stopped cooking. 21 goals is absolutely outrageous. Connor Fields had 14 shots on goal in the game. He scored 6 goals. Wild numbers, especially when you compare that efficiency to the Halifax-Toronto game where Clark Peterson had 21 shots on goal and scored twice. To be as efficient as Fields was in this game with a sock trick and then only on 14 shots on goal, to be just under 50% with his conversion rate was simply astounding. I just wish that the game was a little closer to Rochester so more people were inclined to throw their socks onto the turf when he scored that 6th one. But all in all, a wild day from the Rochester Knighthawks as they get to 500 at 7-7 now with that win over the Las Vegas Desert Dogs. So they sweep the season series against the Desert Dogs and now get ready to take on the Ottawa Black Bears next week. But before we get into the Black Bears, still a couple more things for this Knighthawks game, because there were a slew of milestones that were hit in just moments in this game that really do still have to be talked about. When you score 21 goals in a game, I think most times the game should probably be talked about at length for a little bit. But all in all, as we're getting to it right now, faceoff dot was relatively equal, interestingly enough, between these two teams. I mean, in the end half of it, the Knighthawks start to pull it out, but when you have almost 40 faceoffs in a game, you're going to end up closer and closer to 50% as you just have to take more. That's just the situation that kind of unfolds in that circumstance. But as we said, Connor Fields comes away with 6 goals, 5 assists for an 11-point night. Loose balls were also one of the categories for Fields where he popped off. He ended the game with 9, and that put him over 600 for his career loose ball recoveries. As a forward, Connor Fields has over 600 loose ball recoveries. It is completely absurd to look at the way that this man's numbers are for someone that has only played in the NLL for 5-6 seasons now. To be averaging around 100 loose balls per season is just simply outrageous. He's literally a top 5 player in the entire NLL in loose balls so far this season, which is insane. And I actually have to pull it up specifically because it's one of the most bizarre company of players that Fields could be around on this loose ball list. Yeah, 3rd in the NLL in loose balls. The only 2 players that are over him are both face-off specialists. And just below him, it is a combination of Robert Hope, who's arguably, I think you could just call him a vacuum at this point. He's a magnet when it comes to loose balls. And Joe Nardella, who is one of the best face-off specialists in the entire NLL, is tied with Fields for loose balls at this point in the season. It doesn't make sense. The next forward on this list, this is where things really get fun. The next forward on this list is Ryan Smith. Actually, funny enough, there's literally not another player that is not either the number 1 defender for their team / transition player for their team or a face-off specialist. And there are 2 Knighthawks forwards in the top 20. Matt Gilray, of course, also in that grouping at 88 right now in the season. But the way that this team gets second chance opportunities and thrives off of them, that's how they shoot so many shots during the course of a game. It's just, that is Knighthawks ball. And it's so awesome to watch because a couple years ago when this expansion era was starting, they did not fight for loose balls. They took their shot, and if it was near the end of the 30, they booked it to the bench because they didn't want to get transition ran on them. And now you have offensive players that are good enough to fight for those possessions, win them back sometimes, and when they don't win them back, come back on defense and actually be a difference to make the change to put the ball back on the offensive end. This game, also a note that I'd missed before as we were talking about the preview for this one, Holden Cattoni recently got traded to the Las Vegas Desert Dogs. He ended up being the leading goal scorer in the game for Vegas with 3. But I'm going to be completely honest with you. I love watching Holden Cattoni lose. That might sound really terrible, and some of you might be Knighthawks fans that like Holden Cattoni. Holden Cattoni was the first reason that I ever pulled receipts in a podcast. I said in the first season I ever covered the Knighthawks that the day they got rid of Holden Cattoni would be the day that they were ready to make the playoffs. And literally the second Holden Cattoni wasn't on the team, they made the playoffs. So, with that said, he's just the epitome to me of what the Knighthawks were when the expansion era started. Guys who have one aspect of their game that is really, really impressive and nothing else to their game that is impressive. Holden Cattoni is probably one of the best pure shooters in the NLL. That's all he's got. So you could take away his shot, stop him running over the top like a hillbilly and getting his on-the-run lefty over-the-shoulder shots. He has nothing to offer a team. I sound really harsh right now, but I won't lie. There's one player for the Knighthawks that has always frustrated me for what he did when he was a Knighthawk and his production as a Knighthawk. Just wasn't clutch ever for the Knighthawks. He would score 3 goals every time you didn't need him to, and he'd come away with one in all of the big time games when other big names weren't coming up with goals. So, and at one point, he was supposed to be the best forward that the Knighthawks had. That offense has changed volumes since that was the case for the team. But ultimately, get double revenge on Holden Cattoni this season. Beat him twice. Beat him on the Wings, beat him on the Vegas Desert Dogs, and when they beat him on the Desert Dogs, they outdid what was one of Holden Cattoni's best games of his career, because the previous franchise record for goals in a game was 19 against Panther City 2 years ago when Connor Fields was at his wedding and on his honeymoon, so he was not playing in that game. It was his first season with the team, and Holden Cattoni had to hold things down, and he absolutely went off against the worst team in the NLL. Now, he's on the worst team in the NLL, and that record that he had led the Knighthawks to with a 19 goals in one game is gone with the 21 now set over Vegas. Just a little bit of a closing the book on Holden Cattoni in my mind as it goes with this one. Just the way this game shook out was absolutely awesome to watch. I don't want to speak poorly about winning by a stupid margin, really, simply to say. But it's been weird these last couple of weeks not technically needing to watch the fourth quarter of a lacrosse game. It's got to come back to bite them at some point. Just they've had these 2 games back to back of just playing that full 60 minutes. And then, I mean, you get the Albany game where it kind of starts to be well, we didn't really need to play that much of the fourth quarter. And then you get this game against Vegas and it's like, oh, we were coasting through the second half. Now you're going to take on an Ottawa team that is the middle of the pack, as middle of the pack as you can come. You've got one of the best talents in all of lacrosse on the offensive side in Jeff Teat, and you've got the only goalie probably in the MVP conversation right now in Zach Higgins in the cage. It's definitely a trap scenario. I know I said that last week with Vegas being at the bottom of the league, but this Ottawa team feels very much on par with the Knighthawks in being that middle of the pack type squad. They are currently sitting just 2 spots away from one another, and things will heavily change in the next couple of weeks because right now the 2 teams just below the Knighthawks are their next 2 opponents. Ottawa's hoping to get to 500. If they get a win over the Knighthawks, they would go up to 500. That would put them then above the Knighthawks because the Knighthawks would now have 1 more loss than wins. So they're really right at that interesting linchpin point of the season. I would say they're sitting at the 7th spot in the league standings, so just inside the playoffs at the moment. They definitely need to keep winning out really through the end of this season if they want to make the playoffs. The NLL's giving them hope, though. Interestingly enough, the NLL Power Rankings came out over in the beginning of the week. I think they came out on Tuesday, actually. The Rochester Knighthawks ranked 3rd in the NLL by the league. That is literally the highest ever that the new expansion era Knighthawks have been ranked in the power rankings by the league in the season. And it's interesting as you look at it because, you know, we look at the teams right now in the NLL. Obviously, Buffalo and Saskatchewan both still over the Knighthawks. You're not going to get any real argument about that one. But Colorado has been so hit or miss this season, with their 5 losses being some of the worst losses of any team in the season this year. Yes, they're 3rd in the rankings based on standings right now, but you can't validate calling them better than Calgary or better than Georgia even, arguably. Meanwhile, Rochester just beat Calgary by 5, and they split games with Halifax. So ultimately up there, I would say definitely top 5. I would not say 3. I don't think that the Knighthawks are the 3rd best team in the NLL right now. I definitely think that Colorado game would have gone differently with Rylan Hartley in goal. Definitely would have gone differently with Hartley in goal. But ultimately, that was who the Knighthawks had when that game played out. And they're really just going to have to push through these last couple of games of the season with wins. It's like we said, they've got 2 bye weeks as this goes on. and they can still win in their bye weeks. Of course, if Halifax, Calgary, or Georgia or Colorado pick up 2 losses in that period of time, they're dead even with the Knighthawks at that point. And we already know tiebreaker against Calgary is in favor of Rochester. Tiebreaker against Halifax is dead even, with both teams getting road wins by only 1 goal. And when it comes to the Georgia Swarm, still a little bit more up in the air on the Swarm It Up situation. But not going to be able to get above Buffalo or Saskatchewan in the playoff seeding this year due to those sweeps of the regular season matchups. Now, with that said, like we've been saying, next week, it's the Ottawa Black Bears, Zach Higgins and Jeff Teat, the 2 big battle points to keep an eye on. Jeff Teat is definitely the player you want to shut down on the offensive end of things. Of course, for those people who may be confused as to who are the Ottawa Black Bears, it is formerly the New York Riptide. Any upstate New York lacrosse fans will know the name Larson Sundown, potentially out of Akron. I believe he has the record for assists, or it's the record for points in high school lacrosse in the state of New York for his career. And he's one of those lefties for the Black Bears. Almost said Riptide. For the Black Bears that plays down low and is their gritty around the crease guy. But ultimately, we keep talking about this week after week, going back to Calgary, who is the Jesse King of the squad? Who is the guy that when you shut his game down, it slows down everybody else on the field? No question, that's going to be 51 in red, Jeff Teat. And ultimately, based on prior experience, the last time that I was there to watch these 2 teams play, it was a preseason game in 2023. So it was the beginning of not this season, but last season. And Jeff Teat scored 2 goals in the 4th quarter in garbage time, and he had 2 assists through the first 3 quarters of that game. This team does, in fact, know how to shut down Jeff Teat. Maybe a little bit's due to the fact that Austin Hazen and the Hazens were like neighbors of the Teats, and there's been a lot of film watched over time by Mike Hazen of Jeff Teat, with the fact that his son and Jeff were on the same team a lot of their junior career. But ultimately, Jeff Teat is one of the players that can beat a game plan that is put in against him, but also the Knighthawks do know how to play against him. So I think, as we've been saying each week, there's always one player on the offense that you want to really try to shut down. Against Albany, it was kind of the inverse. Let one player pop off and we can shut down the rest of the group. Now for this Ottawa squad, it's shut down Jeff Teat. There's no doubt about it. If you can shut down Jeff Teat, you can force Ottawa to score less than double digits in goals in a game. And if you can do that, then all it's going to come down to is if you can beat Zach Higgins 10 times. I don't think that there's any chance this game falls under the same category as our last few. I don't see how the Knighthawks can bag that many goals against someone who has been playing that well this season. But ultimately, I mean, they're one of the best scoring teams in the NLL. There's no question about it. This Knighthawks offense, which also just got upgraded over this last week at the trade deadline, is one of the best in the NLL. It is, period, one of the most high volume shooting squads that you can get. And then also adding in a guy like Brad McCulley just last week at the trade deadline allows you to have a little bit more aggression when you come out onto the floor. Now, I don't know where exactly he's going to fit into this lineup. Based on the forwards that they have, they run 4 righties, 3 lefties, and constantly have to deal with either Curtis Knight, Turner Evans, or Graydon Hogg being scratched. One of those 3 is always scratched because they run 7 forwards. And then, I mean, we haven't even seen Austin Hazen touch the turf yet this year. I really don't think we will. He seems like the heir apparent to when Curtis Knight is eventually ready to retire to fill into that spot. But right now, it's definitely hard to make the lineup on that Knighthawks offense. And with what Graydon Hogg has been doing in these last couple weeks, scoring 4 goals in that game against the Las Vegas Desert Dogs, it's even harder to find a way into that lefty side of the floor when you've still got a captain that is being scratched at different times in the season. So not sure if we even really will see Brad McCulley at any point through this regular season. He hasn't played at all for Vancouver in this regular season, in the 24-25 season. So maybe we won't see him, but definitely good to know that on the depth of this squad, you do have guys that you can call on in certain weeks when you know it's going to be a chippier opponent, like a Halifax game or like a Buffalo game, where you can make sure he's on the lineup and you're ready to throw hands whenever you need to against guys like that. So now Knighthawks a little bit more bolstered. Dan Coates back to IR, unfortunately, after 2 weeks ago against Albany was the last time that he played. But Tyler Hall's back into the lineup, gives you that other look also at the faceoff dot. If Sis gets into a rut at any point, you can go to Halls, you can go to Jensen. They've got the squad in there, and Halls can run a little bit more in transition than Coates can. But all in all, ups and downs always happen. Mitch Ogilvy's still out of the lineup right now on IR, and we'll just have to see how this squad shakes out. But it's going to be a 3:00 game this weekend, a bit of an interesting one, a Saturday game at 3 at Ottawa for the Knighthawks. And as we said, if they can shut down Jeff Teat and score more than 10, I think the Knighthawks can do it. But with that said, superstition is still king, and we will still say this is going to be a 9-8 Ottawa game. I think that Ottawa is 100%. If any team is built to keep scores low in a game, it is this Black Bears squad. So we'll sit at 9-8 Black Bears is my prediction for this matchup. Remember, 3:00, not an evening start in Ottawa. That game, of course, will be on ESPN+. And as for the Amerks, as we wrap things up here today, they're going to be playing at 7 tomorrow against the Providence Bruins at home. That's going to do it for us here today from Against the Boards. I've been Chamberlain Bauder. Thanks to my producer, Paul Russo, for the airwaves. We'll see you next week.